You can call
Time
some
for a
people.
few-
Let's
a
do
few
2 or
questions.
3.
Okay,
Yeah.
over here.
Just a quick question on the topic of providing wind energy. Right now, as you know, the president is looking to do offshore drilling throughout the eastern seaboard. If we were to also have wind farms off of the coast of Long Island, how will you overcome the, for lack of a better term, NIMBY opposition to their own interests?
So the question was, what about the not in my backyard feeling for the offshore wind? What about the people who make their livelihood from the sea? And I do have a window into those issues because I have attended 2 different meetings on the offshore wind information sessions. One was in Melville, and the trades and the union people were there. They were like, yeah, we're going to build it, we're going to be ready. The meeting out in Southampton was quite different because the representatives of the fishing community were there. And the New York State engineer presented his big plan, 16,000 square mile study area, and we photographed the wildlife and so on. And people in the room said, we haven't been brought to the table. And I could immediately see that although the engineer thought they hadn't. They were being asked to mark up, the fishermen were being asked to mark up maps. It wasn't being acknowledged that you should be paid to mark up the maps. It wasn't being acknowledged that that's your intellectual property you're giving up if you mark up the maps. And it wasn't being acknowledged that the NYSERDA engineer has an air-conditioned office and a full-time salary to think about this negotiation, and the fisherman is sweating either losing a day's wages off his boat or sweating it over dinner time. What's this negotiation going to be about? So just that buy-in. How can we embargo and coarsen your data for you? How can we help you? We know there's power imbalance, number 1. Number 2, sometimes you just have to give people the knowledge that you have. I was out on the, I was out in the Hamptons at a sustainable farming event and chatting about this, and a guy said, my neighbor has a steel boat, it's always rusty. He does a lot of work to keep it from rusting. Aren't these wind structures made of steel? I'm sure they're gonna rust. That sounds ridiculous to me. He didn't know that this technology had been standing for 20 or 30 years in Northern Europe. I told him that these wind turbines have been 30 years ago installed in Norway. Whatever alloy they're made or coated with, which I did not know off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to find out for him, right? But I was confident that that question had an answer and that this was not new technology, just new to us. So sometimes it's about giving people knowledge, and then you're not pushing them to change their mind, but you're saying, here's something about that steel that you didn't know, then they can make up their own minds. Maybe you in the middle here?
Okay, I'm Carter Bancroft from Huntington, and I'm a retired research scientist, physicist, and biologist. And if you head to, or are going to give up your tenure to run for office, I respect you for doing that. I'd like to ask you. It's great that you've given us your view on renewable energy, and you weren't here. But what about your views on other progressive issues such as DACA, income inequality?
Income equality. I'll start by answering that because that's the story behind the story. One of my first experiences on Long Island was to be taken out to dinner by the group that hired me in a very pretty restaurant on the shore in Bellport Village. And then a year later, I decided to do a Habitat for Humanity job, which was also in Bellport, in North Bellport. And my feeling then that, okay, there's another side of the tracks, but we're all together here. I'm pounding shingles on a roof with a deaf teenager, and there's a woman in a wheelchair pushing a broom underneath me, and whatever we have, what I had was a free Saturday and the luxury of pounding shingles, right? Other people had what they had, but we were all together. 20 years later, it feels like there's that border wall between us that we're being told not to cross, and I don't want to live that way, and I don't think any of us wants Long Island to feel that way. I talk a lot about vocational schools in my materials. I don't want anyone's child to feel like there's one kind of school they'll be looked down on and another kind they'll be praised for. I want them to be able to go into any job that is going to suit them and be able to go to it right out of high school, just like my classmates did in the 1980s when they took my English class and then did auto mechanics. So I care about all facets of wealth inequality, and there's so many ways to address it without using those words to address it without sounding like you're lecturing people about wealth inequality. I really care about trade schools. I really care about opportunities. I believe that evidence-based policy will get us the progressive outcomes that I believe in. So I'm on record for your progressive scorecard with this group. I believe that those are the morally correct and usually best way to save the people's money, right? That's the right thing to do. And there'll be times when the Republicans around the room have the facts right in our argument. My job is to explain in committee why I think so.
Excuse me. Do you stand on the quality of regime change in foreign countries, especially the Middle Eastern and Muslim countries?
We shouldn't be doing it, and nothing good ever comes out of it. Maybe you? Yes, please.
Yes. All of the bill is in Albany. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the Climate and Community Protection Act and how to get people like John Flanagan, Karen Lavelle, Thomas Fauci, and Phil Boyle on it. What are your thoughts on that bill?
That's a good question. I think we have to keep on emphasizing that things happen when people have more community agreement and more community buy-in, and the tools in that bill are to give people that sense of partial ownership. And I've seen this in operation in my previous job, where sometimes the manager just said, give us all your ideas and we'll put them into the memory hole and then we'll make a project. And nobody had any buy-in or any feeling of ownership of what was going to happen. They weren't going to want to cooperate. So I think our politicians above all should understand that nothing happens without a buy-in. And a planet that is protected from climate change, money can't buy. We all have to be willing, even if it's just not to use a plastic soda straw, whatever level it is, our willingness is required. I would think that our public officials who can't get anywhere without the rest of us would have to be reminded of that by us.
So Albany too.
Albany too. I think that's exactly right.
I just want to piggyback. Well, first of all, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming to speak, and sorry for your troubles with the rain. So thank you. I just want to piggyback off of what some of the conversation was that just happened. Just so you know that this Valentine's Day on the 14th, there is a public hearing on the impacts of the proposed offshore drilling here in New York, and it would be really great if everybody can tell a neighbor or a friend. We want to get as many people as possible to come out and give their opinion on that offshore drilling. If you can't actually give your own opinion in person, you can write a testimony, and it could be sent in as well. So
we'll post that all over Facebook.
Yes.
If you're not yet a member, you should join our Facebook group, because we're always pushing out events there, Long Island Activists.
And that's going to be happening at 725 Veterans Memorial Highway in Smithtown. And that's this coming Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. So please try to rally people to get out there. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Can I just piggyback
Yeah.
on what you're doing? And in light of what we had discussed about unions, on March 24th, there's a huge working people's meetup in New York City. February 24th. You're right. February 24th, 111 Worth Street. AFSCME is sponsoring it. All the civil service unions are going to be there, and a lot of brother and sister unions are going to be there as well.
Can you
Right.
send me that information and we'll put it on?
Yeah,
the
and so
website too?
just because it's very easy to get off track. We do have 4 more candidates that are here. We'll try to move through it a little quicker, and then we have announcements of upcoming events.
To disclose the candidate form.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have on my calendar the offshore drilling hearing
the camera,
in Hauppauge in the Legislative Office Building on the 15th at 10:30 a.m.
Okay, the one she was just talking about was the 14th. I don't know if maybe there's more than one, or if there's a mistake. We'll have to double check that. Okay. So we will, after the candidates go, we're going to be talking about upcoming events, and then we always have an open mic situation where if people want to come up and speak for a couple of minutes and mention events and things like that, we'll have time for that at the end. We still have the room for another hour, and hopefully they're not going to kick us out exactly at that time. So if we need to push it a little bit, hopefully we can. All right, we have one more candidate for a congressional race. This is Robert Shanlin, who is planning to challenge Rice in a primary. We don't have a mic anymore. The battery's dead. So.
I might channel my Marco Rubio. I am a democratic socialist Jew from Brooklyn. Did I win? My great-grandfather was cut in half fighting for the Bolsheviks. My grandfather left Russia in 1917 to come here, so the politics was pounded into me from day one. At 13, I led a peace march against the Vietnam War across Oceanside. I was at Zuccotti Park for Occupy. I was at Woodstock, the original. I've done lots of marches and that kind of thing. I was never a registered Democrat. I've been a registered independent my whole life until I changed the Democrats so I could vote for Bernie against Hillary in a primary. The place where I'm going to differ from everyone else you're talking to here is that politics in this country is built on a bad foundation. It's about raising money. If you go to the Federal Election Commission website, 100% of it is about raising and reporting requirements. I'm running a campaign where I'm not taking any money from anyone. And I'm not going to win unless the people in this room volunteer to put in time. Because you can take one step forward and win a progressive election. You're going to take 2 steps back in the long run against politics because you can't outspend the Koch brothers and you can't outspend the Fortune 500. If I win with no money, that will start a political revolution because others will see that it's possible and it will happen across the country in the next wave. That's what you want. There's your revolution. You're not going to overthrow Citizens United. You're not getting it changed unless you get the right people into office. They're not cutting their own throats. They're getting rich. Nancy Pelosi's made $100 million in Congress. When you're selling out the middle class on a daily basis, fighting for those Wall Street hedge funds, you know what your campaign slogan is when you run for re-election? Chuck Schumer, fighting for the middle class. Cory Booker took more drug money, company money, than anyone in history. And he said, don't let American-made and American-packaged drugs come back from Canada. And people are eating cat food and dying prematurely because Cory Booker took the money. These are not progressives. They're not the people you want. And you need people who aren't taking money. As far as issues go, the money has to be first, or you're building a house on a bad foundation of sand, and it's going to collapse. As far as those issues go, Mariana, you're not going to ask the question?
I know where you stand, but go ahead, tell the room.
Capitalism has no place in medicine. I stood in the back of a room in 1992 in Vegas, in an auditorium listened to a major drug company executive tell the crowd, every child in this country needs to be medicated. And they stood and cheered because they understood what he was saying. If you get a child at 6 years old used to taking a pill every day, that child will take a pill for something every day for the rest of his life. And the drug cartel in this country is no different than Colombia or Mexico. They don't care if you live or die, and they don't care how harsh your life is. They want to sell you more drugs. We must have a national drug research unit. We must nationalize the drug companies. We must nationalize the energy companies, merge them with the EPA into one unit, and do a Manhattan Project of clean renewables. You're not fixing this. If you leave it in private hands, some things don't belong there, like jails. I did 25 years as a correctional officer at the Nassau County Jail, and their board is not going to back me. You have 7 white male racists with Trump stickers on their cars. I know these guys personally for years. But you can't privatize jails. Jails just don't belong privatized. So, any questions? I need your help. I'm not taking money, and that's how you set an example for the rest of the country. No questions. Okay, go to Bob Shanlin, SHANLIN for Congress.com. You'll see where I am on the issues. Call me. Contact me. I need the help.
All right, so with the congressional races out of the way, we also have some people who are running for state senate. I'd like to invite Andrew Grover, who's a long-term member of Long Island Activists, who's decided to throw his hat into the ring.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. I grew up in Massapequa. I moved to Manhattan, and I ran a department for a construction company for about 14 years until my parents got too old to work anymore, and they couldn't afford, and weren't able to keep their house, and thus we moved out to try and take care of them. So we sold our apartment in the East Village, Ricardo and I, who many of you know, and used the proceeds to rebuild my parents' house, and we moved back out here to take care of my mom and dad. About the same time, I started a business of my own, which I've run for the last 6 years, until the end of last year, when the only carrier that would ever give us insurance coverage decided they weren't going to offer us a policy. We had never had a claim. We had never had any threat of litigation, and they gave me no explanation. This is an example of the way we're being taken advantage of by insurance companies in general. This dovetails with the situation with healthcare. Again, insurance companies are leading us around by the nose. They're impoverishing people on the basis of the fact that they have a health crisis, and this has got to stop. The New York Health Act needs to pass as soon as possible. This is the main reason why I decided to run for state senate, because I feel that the logjam with the IDC is not going to be broken by one progressive senatorial candidate being successful this year, but by several at least. It needs to happen in a big way. One or two seats is not going to make the difference. We know how dysfunctional the state legislature is, and as a result, we need a big progressive wave to enter into the legislature, both in the assembly, but especially in the Senate, which is ruled by a numerical minority of Republicans that is enabled by the IDC and perhaps certain other forces. It's a little complicated. Beyond the New York Health Act, I just want to echo the need to get off of fossil fuels and to establish clean renewable energy, 100% clean renewable energy. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. As quickly as possible. We know that we're being told that this is going to cost jobs. I think everybody in this room knows that's ridiculous. The fact is that it's a win-win-win to establish clean renewable energy. It's going to be a huge economic driver. It's going to create tons of jobs. And if we invest public money into this, it's going to pay for itself. It's going to generate power. The savings in mitigation of climate change alone, the fact that we're not going to have to worry about military bases and our homes being flooded and all this rest of this kind of thing, is it makes it a no-brainer. Education-wise, we know that lower income, brown and black neighborhoods have been neglected forever. Their schools are crumbling. They've been left behind in so many ways. This needs to stop. Your zip code should not dictate how much support you're going to get as far as school buildings, educational facilities, teacher qualifications, etc. So this is something that needs to change in a big way as well. Those are my three big issues, I would say. Also, I want to push very strongly for legalization of recreational marijuana. This again is an economic win-win. It's like this elephant in the room that no one wants to confront. Like every reasonable person knows that pot is innocuous. It's much less damaging to the body than, say, alcohol. And the fact that it's illegal is absurd. And it's also people are being jailed for smoking a doobie on the street. Which is not only, let's face it, it's egregious in so many ways to the people that it's been inflicted on, but it's also costing us billions of dollars in maintaining prisons, and it costs about $40,000 a year to incarcerate somebody for smoking a joint on the street. This needs to end. Anybody who's been thrown in jail for being a drug user, that sentence needs to be commuted. So that's another area where there's tons of room for improvement. So thanks very much for this. Anybody have a question?
Would you please tell the audience who you're running against and why?
Okay, the incumbent is Camp Hannon. Oh, by the way, it's District 6. It's Central Nassau County. Camp Hannon is the chairman of the Health Committee in the New York State Senate. He is one of the main reasons why the New York Health Act has not even got to the Senate floor. And so unseating Camp Hannon will be central to the fight to institute the NYHA. So please vote. Any other questions? Hi.
One thing positive I can say about your is Kent has been supportive of bicycle laws. How do you feel about public transportation funding and biking and safety?
That's a very good question. She asked about bike safety and public transportation. I'm very gratified by the fact that New York City has prioritized the establishment of safe bike lanes. I used them when I was a Manhattan resident, and was very glad to have a car between me and knuckleheads on the road. I think we should definitely prioritize establishing bike lanes out here in the suburbs. Actually, Broadway in Massapequa, right near where I live, has 2 lanes in either direction, no central turning lane, and then a parking lane with absolutely no margin for error. If a person opens their car door a little bit, you take it right off. My brother was killed on Broadway in 1969, and it's the same layout now as it was then. I don't think, as a state senator, I would be directly able to affect that situation, but I would definitely put pressure on local officials to change. It wouldn't cost, you wouldn't even have to repave it. All you'd have to do is put a central turning lane, 1 main lane in either direction, and a much wider safety zone with lines drawn. All you'd have to do is redraw the lines. It would be much safer. As far as mass transit, public transportation, we absolutely need to prioritize that. We need to add rail capacity. We need to update the safety systems. That is a state issue, and I would advocate very strongly for that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. One other candidate here also running for state senate. We have Anthony Sarno.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Sarno. I'm running for the Senate 4th District, which includes Babylon and Islip. Current incumbent there is Bill Sykes, who's been very, some of the key issues I'm running on, corporate finance reform. Finance reform has been a major issue that's come to light, especially as corporate spending on elections has skyrocketed. I'm game for public funded elections. I want to get the corporate money completely out of politics. We need an election system that represents the people and not corporations. They are not people. They do not look out for our best interests. They don't care about us. They care about profit. Healthcare. The New York Health Act has been brought up a couple times in here. Full support of that. I want universal health care. This is not an issue that should even be a question. We're looking at the rest of the world that's converting over to this system, and us as a leader is lagging behind. And as a New York resident, let's start here. Let's set the example for the rest of the country and move us forward towards a a better system, set the example, and make it known that we need this and how it can work. The projections are already that it's going to save us a ton of money. People's costs are going to go down. People with health insurance go bankrupt. Like, how is that possible? You're supposed to have protection under health insurance, but you're going bankrupt and you can't afford anything. That's not acceptable. We like to tout we're the richest country that ever lived, but here we are unable to take care of our own people. So we need to start with that. Environmentalism. We need to, yes, we need to up our environmental awareness. We need to get people more involved in the environment and take into account that we are destroying our environment. Our population of the world is ballooning, and without switching to renewable energies, and without taking into account the little things here and there that are going to help stave off, this ever-growing need. And we need more research. We need more efforts to improve our environment because we're not getting a new world. This is the one we have. I was born and raised here on Long Island. I spent my entire life here. It's expensive to live here. It's hard, especially for my generation. I watch a lot of my friends struggle with the costs, with everything that's going on. And it's not working. Our system is not working. So I'm here to run to improve it. And I'm running a very liberal agenda. I want to make changes. I know people are scared of changes, but we're not going to get anywhere unless we're willing to tackle some of these issues that have sat on the back burner for too long. Any questions?
Given that you're representing Babylon, I'm sure you've heard of the current scandal that Rich Schaefer is embroiled under hiring Henry Lindsay, who is accused and currently awaiting trial for domestic abuse. Would you be willing to sponsor a statewide bill that blocks public employment for people pending trial for violent crimes?
I would sponsor a bill that would definitely, anybody who received a conviction. We do live under a policy of innocent until proven guilty, and to not have people get the chance to defend themselves before being, but if they've been convicted, absolutely. They should not be holding public office.
Dovetail on that question for a second. Domestic abuse is a little bit different than other types of crimes in that the burden on women is so high and it's so difficult for women to oftentimes prove that they've been abused, and that oftentimes just an accusation, especially multiple accusations, tends to be dispositive in that maybe there's something there. So to that end, although the innocent until proven guilty framework generally is supposed to work, for this one issue, and we can extend to rape as well, and domestic abuse and sexual assault, do you think there's an exception that we can make in the state when it comes to people who have been widely accused of these things to maybe not be able to hold public office?
There's definitely a framework to be had. Our laws need improvement in this area, especially since this is a growing problem in this country as more and more of these cases come to light. I'm not sure that there's a black and white, answer that we can just automatically, dismiss people from running, once an accusation comes to light. But for multiple accusations, there definitely can be. I would have to look at that more to frame that.
Just to clarify, my original question was for appointees, not elected officials.
Sorry, appointees.
Yeah.
Oh, for appointees?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I don't think anybody should be able to serve in public office if they've been convicted of something.
But should somebody be appointed if they're under active investigation for domestic abuse?
Be appointed? I don't believe so, no.
All right, here we go.
Yes.
So that's why I understand you're going to the New York State Senate. How familiar are you with the 8-member IBC? And what are your thoughts on how to do it.
The 8-member IBC?
Yes, the group of 8 breakaway Democrats. There are 8 Democrats who allow people like Phil Boyle and John Flanagan to do what they want.
I'm running on a very progressive ticket. I'm only one person. I'm actually really glad to see a lot of other progressive candidates starting to tackle some of these other districts, because clearly a lot of the policies I'm going for are not going to pass with the current state of our Senate. One of the reasons I'm pursuing the Senate is because the Assembly has passed New York State Health Act. Senate hasn't even brought to the floor for a vote, I don't believe yet. So I want to, this is where the change needs to be made. This is one of the districts that could help swing those votes. You know, I'm willing to work with anybody in the Senate to try to get things passed, but I have a very clear, you know, moral standing of where I am on these issues and what I want to get done. And I am willing to fight for them.
All right, thank you. All right, and I just want to make an announcement about a candidate. There was one other candidate here who's running for state senate. His name is Brad Schwartz. He did have to leave. He didn't realize how long the meeting was going to go. He did leave flyers in the back that outlines his position, and we will try to have him come speak at another event soon, so he can speak to membership, because obviously it's unfortunate. I wish I knew he had to leave early. We could have moved things around, but it was too late to fix. All right, so that went a lot longer than I thought it would go, but I think that's great. It's wonderful for candidates to come out and meet people and answer questions. That's something you don't often see. So you can see things are becoming more grassroots, that candidates will come out and speak at, you know, groups of 50 or 60 people in a library in a way that I don't think was really happening in the past. All right, so now we can get to the sort of core of the meeting. There's a bunch of things going on, and then I want to have the WFP come speak for a few minutes. We have someone here from the Huntington Young Dems who wants to speak as well, and then we'll finish with some events and then open mic. So the big thing that I want to talk about that's coming up soon that's really important for membership is that we do have an elected steering committee, and every year the steering committee has to run for re-election. So we are not sure exactly how many current members of steering are going to run again. The number we're looking for is 7. We currently have 8 because of a weird scenario in which one of our members awesomely was elected. What's that? because she was elected to the assembly, and so we went back to our old election results, and 2 people were tied for the next position, so we just put them both on to fill the spot. But ideally there would be 7. I think at least 4 or 5 people will be running again, but that's not 100% sure, and obviously all those seats are open. We'll open a full election, and the top 7 vote getters will win. So we're very interested in people who have been involved running. The only requirement is that you have to be a dues-paying member. So we have really high dues that you have to pay. We'll take as much as you'll give, but for $2.70 a month recurring, you can become a dues-paying member. And so what that would mean is, 1, if you set up that dues-paying member, you get one of these awesome T-shirts with all the cool kids are wearing.
I will.
Yes, see? Be like Judy.
She's got a really cool the Bernie thing on the back.
Yeah, that's a special version.
Special edition.
So you get that. The other thing is that you get to vote in major decisions. So the current way we have the system set up is that you would get to vote for the steering committee, which obviously has a big role in choosing sort of what direction we're going. And the other thing is that our process for endorsement, like for example, for some of the candidates who were here, is that steering would make a recommendation after speaking to candidates and having them fill out questionnaires, and then that recommendation would go before membership and would require a 2/3 membership vote. So you would have a lot of say in sort of who gets endorsed, and people can give feedback during that process as well. So there are some advantages to being a dues-paying member. And again, it is a very low bar. We'll take more, and there are definitely people who are giving more. But this way you have a little some skin in the game, and we use that money to fund all sorts of things like paying for rooms and holding activities and creating signs and these banners and things like that. Everything costs money. And at first, the steering committee was just putting up on all the money ourselves, and then our significant others were going to leave us because we were bankrupting our families, and so now we are taking some money. So if you'd like to have a say in that, please become a member. You can go to longislandactivist.org and click Join Us, and then it'll take you to Act Blue where you can give a donation. And then again, that will give you the ability to vote for the next steering committee or to run for the next steering committee. So if you're interested in getting involved and being active, you don't need to applaud.
No, I won't applaud anybody who steps up to the rock.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. I can tell you that as someone who works full time and has 2 children, and then does this, it's like another at least part-time job. It's 10, 15, 20 hours a week of work to keep this organization running. So it is a huge commitment of time and energy. But if that's you and you want to have a say, please. Very soon we'll be sending out the information where people can sign up and fill out their sort of, what's your vision for the group? That's how we did it last time. And then at an event we had some people speak, and then we had a full vote either in person or online, depending on what people preferred. Both were valid. And yeah, so we're hoping to do that by April. So very soon we'll send out the information online and through our email. If you've signed up online, you get the emails, and all that stuff will be on Facebook as well. That's the big agenda item that I wanted to bring up. The other thing is we have finalized our bylaws. A lot of people have been asking about the bylaws. Every time we tried to finalize it, we were like, wait a second, what do we want to do with it? And we would start reworking certain parts and everything. There is a current finalized version. We're going to be posting it on the website. And then we'll sort of go from there. Obviously, the steering committee can vote on changing those things afterwards. Nothing is written in stone. But that is now finalized, and that'll be online. And then we have a bunch of events and things coming up that I want to talk about, but I want to save that for the end because we've had people here from other groups who wanted to speak about certain things. So if the WFP speakers can come up. Yeah, you can come sit. I wish the microphone was still working, but you just have to project.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having us. On this rainy Sunday. We're here to talk with you just briefly, and I guess interested in answering your questions and hearing your concerns and what you're interested in learning more about a question that has been brought up by the NIPAN Board of Directors.
The Executive Committee.
Committee of NIPAN. About the possibility of affiliating with the New York WFP, which is a third progressive political party in New York State. We're also a national progressive political organization that is focused, much like NIPAN, on electing candidates. We see that as our kind of our path to change is elections. We work to recruit, train, and elect really incredible progressive activists to run and win, and then the day after the election, start holding them accountable to our vision for what matters for working families across the state or across the country. We do that in a number of different ways. Here in New York, we have actually a ballot line that we've got about 200,000 votes on every statewide election. About 200,000 New Yorkers vote on our line. And that means that for the candidates that receive our endorsement and are petitioned onto that line, that can be the difference between a win and a loss, especially in districts out in Long Island sometimes. That's really the margin of victory for candidates, which gives us power to influence them and hopefully yank them to the left. We were founded 20 years ago in New York State when we saw the slow capture of the Democratic Party by the same forces that have captured the Republican Party, or really are the base of the Republican Party. That they were no longer accountable to working people and to people of color, but to financial interests, really. And thought that working people and people of color needed their own political party, their own independent political party. And we worked to pull, yank, tug, push Democrats to the left by through our endorsement process. We screen them and use that the margin of votes we can provide in any given race to hold them accountable to our vision for what's important for working families. We also primary Democrats by endorsing and putting a more progressive candidate on our line, or endorse maybe like the more progressive, what we view as the more progressive challenger in a crowded race. So I can think of like Bill de Blasio or running for lieutenant governor currently, Jumaane Williams, as examples where we did that, where we ran races of what we thought were the most progressive option in a crowded field and were able to cut a path to victory. And sometimes we run candidates only on our line, and hope and work really, really hard to have them not be a spoiler candidate, but have them actually win just on our line. So Tish James, as a public advocate, is an example of that as well. Across the state, though, all of these decisions about our strategy and endorsements and otherwise are made based off of our affiliates. We've got a really rigorously democratic endorsement process, and affiliating means that you get a vote based off of your membership and what your membership believes is the most progressive path forward in every election in New York State, from very local to statewide. Affiliating doesn't mean that we've got any influence or impact whatsoever on your endorsements, on your separate independent activities, but it's really just a welcome into a group, a coalition of progressive organizations from major labor unions in New York State to immigrants' rights and civil rights organizations like Make the Road New York and New York Communities for Change, amongst many, many others, that fight for a path forward for working families in New York State. So I wanted to take questions on that because that is, I think, it was raised by statewide leadership of NIPAN, but every single chapter should choose to opt into this or not opt into this based off of their own concerns and what you think is strategic for you all. And we want to make it sure that it works for everybody before we advance forward. So, and this is Kelly Onis, our Long Island political director. Yeah.
So would the LIA members be paying dues to WWF?
So not exactly the statewide. If NIPAN affiliates as a state, it would pay an annual dues at our most minimum rate of like $800 a year.
NIPAN, the whole organization.
Yeah.
So if NIPAN votes as a state to join, can individual chapters opt out, or
Yes.
is it?
Yeah. Yes. I see no reason. Like I think that would definitely be the most appropriate.
Individual chapters still have the option of joining on their own.
And so, just because it was the big question that steering had, just to sort of put out there, was in issues of endorsement. If WFP makes endorsements that LIA doesn't agree with, or vice versa, neither one is committed to the endorsements of the other. So there would still be the option for separation on individual campaigns if there's disagreement there. So that was one of the big questions.
I have a quick question. I've looked at the Working Families, I've tried to determine the Working Family Party's presence in Long Island before because I was curious and wondered if there was anything I could do, meetings I could go to, or things I could help them with. And I wasn't able to find anything. Is this more something, is this how you establish a local presence, is by working with the existing groups there, or do you have stuff that you are doing independently of the local groups as well?
Yeah, I think the WFP is best understood as a coalition of groups. We have party registrants that I guess you could consider our base, but really the way we organize is through our members, our member organizations. And so, being a leading member of LIPAN or any of the other organizations is probably the best way to engage.
Ricardo?
Can you give some examples of some candidates you've been for?
Yeah.
Well, we've endorsed. I think last year we endorsed upwards of 120 candidates or something like that.
In Long Island.
In Long Island alone.
Across the state as well.
I mean, in the countywide, we had endorsements of Laura Curran and Tim Seeley for Suffolk County District Attorney. Obviously, we were very happy to play a role in the special election of Christine Pellegrino. We endorse in almost every single race.
But they didn't have primary.
I'm sorry?
They didn't have primary.
There were other candidates who were interested in running those races, and there was
a threat of a primary,
Yes.
I would say. But to give you maybe a broader scope also, I mean, I mentioned Jumani and Bill de Blasio in New York City, but across the state across the country we make endorsements. So we had boots on the ground in Larry Krasner's race in Pennsylvania. We were the group that recruited Randy Bryce to challenge Paul Ryan in Wisconsin. We had boots on the ground in Chokwe Lumumba's race for mayor in Jackson, Mississippi, and many, many, many others.
I think a party like a working family party can have more impact on the positions and issues and elections outcome if they endorse candidates during the primary, because especially it will help progressive candidates. But I have seen that working family parties over the years, I'm talking, have not been involved as much as in the primaries as they should be. And then whoever gets the nomination from Democratic Party, and if working family party thinks, okay, their answers were good enough on their questionnaire, they just go and endorse, which takes away the importance of working family parties, because then you look like just somebody who is taking the cue from the Democratic Party. And that doesn't help you very much in the progressive circles. So how would you address that situation?
Well, what I would first say is that, the WFP is a coalition of our affiliate organizations, and the determinations that are made are through a collaborative, open, democratic process of our affiliate organizations and our state committee members. So there's no decree from a centralized working families party. If Long Island activists were to participate as an affiliate representative of NIPAN, your voice would become part of the conversation, and the vote of the organization would be something that would be factored in with our other partner organizations. I certainly recognize and understand that we do often have a relationship with Democrats, and we endorse a lot of Democrats, but there's no single entity that is WFP, and if NIPAN were to join our organization, you'd be adding your own voice to the process and bringing your own thoughts and changing the dynamic in the room.
I guess I would say that, I'm definitely not as well versed in Long Island political history as certainly the majority of the people in this room are. I would say that across the state, I think we do play a really serious role in primaries. We get really actively, aggressively engaged in primaries and make a lot of enemies with the Democratic Party across the state, because we pick who we think is going to be the most progressive person and give them a party line, whatever happens in the primary. That's exactly what we did in Christine Pellegrino's race. Is way before the Democratic Party came out and endorsed, we're willing to be supportive of her. We said she's going to be our candidate no matter what, and they ended up following the lead. So, I think this kind of energy is what, and all of the progressive candidates who come before you today, is what's going to allow us to get more involved in primaries. The fact that there's more progressive challengers even running and interested. I actually campaign managed for a progressive candidate running in a very competitive three-way primary in Long Beach, in Nassau, in 2016. So I think we can.
And also the timeline on our petitioning process determines that we have to make our determination before any primary. We have to petition all federal candidates onto the ballot in March, and petition all state and local candidates in June. So we make our determination before the primary takes place. Last year, as an organization, we engaged in making a determination, not placing a placeholder in the two major countywide elections that were taking place that year. And we had a significant effect in terms of who the ultimate nominee of the parties was. So that, we make our decisions, and I think that should NIPAN choose to join the organization, Long Island activists would bring a very healthy voice to the conversation in the room. But that's our process.
So let's say that, if I understand this correctly, NIPAN decided to affiliate with Working Families Party, and then the LIA would have the ability to vote on the specifically which candidates you're going to approve. would that happen on a rank and file basis? Like, do you have a website set up where people would individually vote, or would we have to decide within the LIA who we're going to vote?
There would be an organizational representative.
Okay, that's all.
Yes.
I'm moving forward on the executive committee of Christchurch Action New York, which is a sister chapter of NIPAN, also a NIPAN board of directors. A couple of things. I don't think I need to remind people the positive role that the Working Families Party played because the Pellegrinos campaign. Not for them, she wouldn't have gotten the Democratic line. She got the other progressive assembly person right now. So that's important. Another thing is, well, I think she's a little too modest to mention it, but David Vanessa here has led the statewide campaign, talking about the New York Health Act and how all those IDC represent state senators have stopped it from being passed. Well, she's led this campaign, made phone calls all over the state to all the IDC districts. Thousands of people committed to not vote for those IDC senators. There's a groundswell that's going on over there. A whole bunch of people joined in that huge coalition. And it's going to continue in the primaries that are happening to them and in the fight over the governor race. So I think if your chapter votes not paying, your chapter votes in affiliated with the Working Families Party, you can hopefully push them to the left to get a candidate against Cuomo. I'll leave it at that. Discussion on that.
So my question is actually more for Ron and Frank and some of the other like OGs in the group after expression. So after post Bernie, so for those that don't know me, my name is Kimberly. I'm on the Provisional Steering Committee that started after the Bernie campaign here in New York. So please refresh my memory because I remember after that, but prior to coming to your house, our little provisional steering committee and starting Long Island Activists, there was a hot minute where you had thought maybe I'll start a WFP chapter of on Long Island.
Yes.
And clearly that didn't I don't know, catch fire.
We had a meeting, only Ron and I showed.
It's true. No, Mike Goodman was there too.
So
We gave it up shortly after.
But Long Island
Yes.
Activists, there was, so please refresh my memory, because I know why I was maybe a little salty towards WFP. I love Ava and Hale. If you could maybe refresh our memory as to what some of the resistance was at that time. Because here we are, 1 year lead, a year and a half, 2 years later.
Sure. So yeah, after the primary, I had reached out to WFP because I was really impressed with their organization and the ways in which they had helped with Bernie in New York.
That's part Steve.
Well, I don't know about that. So I had reached out to them, and I had been in contact with Emily Abbott, who used to be the sort of representative on Long Island. And I had tried to organize a chapter working through the old Long Island for Bernie organization. And after a couple of months, I was struggling to get enough people who were willing to change their official voter identification. In order to have an official chapter, it's not just people who will say they support WFP. You need a certain number of people who will actually register WFP and give up their Democratic registration. And there was a lot of pushback of people who were afraid that they would then lose the vote, the right to vote in a Democratic primary, because of course New York unfortunately has a closed primary system. So that was the real struggle. There were meetings where not that many people showed up. I think there was a lot of frustration after the primary and things like that. But the biggest issue is that people kept saying, I'm interested, but I don't want to register. I don't want to lose my Democratic registration and then not be able to vote in the primary. So I think that was the biggest hang up that I ran into. And then other people, I think you and Daniel were among the first who said, why don't we just create something brand new? And then we, Long Island Activists, grew out of that. But yeah, so there was an attempt, and it wasn't able to gain traction.
The timing
That could be part of it, yeah.
I just want to say too, having worked on Pellegrino campaign. Having the backing of the Working Families Party was just, and I worked in the office, so every day, their people would be coming into the office, getting their assignments, and now the boots are on the ground. And that you cannot elect without getting those boots on the ground. They got to be knocking on doors, and they excel at doing that. To me, it's a win-win. If we can affiliate with them, it's a win-win. It just, we can't do it by ourselves. We need to partner, and I think it would be good. So, thanks.
All right, so I think we'll leave it there for now. Thank you. All right, we also have Joe Sarno from the Huntington Young Dems who wanted to speak for a few minutes. Joe?
My name is Joseph Sarno. I'm the president of the Huntington Young Democrats, and one of my goals is to make the Huntington Committee more progressive. In order to do that, we need progressives to join the Young Democrats, and then eventually it will filter into the committee itself. It is primed for change, and so we're looking for your support. If you know anyone from the ages of 18 to 35 that would like to join the Young Democrats that live in the town of Huntington, please let me know. I have my information in the back. Also, we have an event coming up on Tuesday. It's the general meetup at Mary Carroll's in Huntington. It is very informal. People who come, have a couple of drinks, have a conversation, and it's from 7:30 to 10. So if you'd like more information, you come up to me afterwards, or go on our website and learn more about the event. So thank you.
All right, so now some upcoming events, and I'll try to go through them quickly because hopefully all of you have already signed up for our email and our Facebook. If you haven't, don't leave here without doing it. Pull out your phone and do it before you go. Again, longislandactivists.org. You sign up there, you'll get all our emails. And just so you know, and huge shout out to Frank for doing this, not only will you get our events, but any other major sort of progressive events going on Long Island, a lot of that stuff gets collected and then put on our calendar, and then it gets shot out every Monday. So every Monday you'll get a list of 20 awesome things going on that week on Long Island that you can take part in. So please sign up for that if you haven't. And if you're on Facebook, go and join Long Island Activists. That's where we do a lot of our organizing. So some major events that are coming up. On March 24th, we have the Long Island Women's Diversity Network Summit, and LIA is going to be a sponsor of one of those events, and one of our steering committee members who is not well today and couldn't be here, Candace, is actually presenting a workshop there. So I think that's a great event. You'll see it pushed all over Facebook soon, so please sign up if you can. Tomorrow, there is a thunderclap, which for those of you who don't know is when you turn all your social media towards one effort, and for this one, it's for the New York Health Act. So we're going to be pushing that out on Facebook again, just saying, if you have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all that other crazy stuff, just start blasting out these messages that they're going to be giving to everyone so that all over the internet, it's just all over the place. We're trying to get attention for that. The New York Health Act is amazing. It's single payer in New York. Most New Yorkers don't even know it exists, and that's a failing of all the activist organizations, that we're not doing enough to get it out there. We can't rely on the media to do it. Local news is not going to cover this stuff. It just doesn't happen. So we're going to have to do it, and one of the major ways that we have is through social media. So we'll be putting it out there like crazy, and if you guys can also get involved, you sign up for the thunderclap, and then it goes through all your accounts, so Facebook just starts posting them. So we just get lots of word out there. There is a trip to Albany, a New York Health trip to Albany. I don't have the information in front of me.
I don't know the date either. Mary.
Okay.
Do you know the date of the Albany lobby?
It's usually in April. The lobby date is in April.
You don't know the exact date.
Okay, yeah, I don't have it here on my agenda.
Right after the budget session. Too far out on my calendar.
Another thing that's going on, for those of you who haven't been noticing this, Hobby Lobby has been opening up on Long Island. The first one has opened, and now there's a second grand opening coming soon. So yeah, one of them is right here in Comac. For those of you that don't know, Hobby Lobby is the company that pushed through all the way to the Supreme Court the case that basically says that your boss gets to determine if your health insurance is going to provide contraceptives. because that's your boss's decision for some crazy reason.
Apparently, it's the only place your boss gets to decide how you spend your compensation.
Yeah, I mean, if you end up having a boss that doesn't believe in like transfusions and stuff like that, I don't know what that means for healthcare in this country. So one, we need the New York Health Act and single payer, because then who cares what your boss thinks, because we'll all have everything. But until then, I think we should make it clear that Hobby Lobby is not welcome here on Long Island. So we're waiting for them to have their grand opening of their next store, because we think that'll be like the biggest publicity moment. And for those of you who may have seen a few months ago, getting involved in the whole Me Too movement, Long Island activists purchased a bunch of the Handmaid's outfits from The Handmaid's Tale. So the day that store opens, we don't know the date yet. We're planning on being outside with a large protest and groups of women silenced by these organizations. So hopefully that'll chase away some customers, and we'll hit them where it hurts, in their wallet. So that's going on. Another big event, this one is way down the line, but one reason I'm bringing it up is because it's very near and dear to me, but also because it involves going away for 2 days, so you'd have to sort of plan in advance. I don't know if you guys remember the name Cindy Shaheen.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so I've been in contact with her about planning a huge event to protest the Pentagon. So literally march on the Pentagon for an anti-war protest. So the date is set. So she's taken the lead on this, October 20th and 21st, which is a weekend. We're trying to get people nationwide to show up and protest the Pentagon. As some people spoke about before, our military budget is out of control. American militarism is out of control. We talk about defending ourselves from terrorism, but terrorism is just a blowback from our military actions that preceded that terrorism. So, we can keep banging our head against the wall. The answer to our problem is not to bang our head against the wall harder. This is an insane situation. And our country is being bankrupted, and yet, the compromise that just came out of Congress the other day was to add another $160 billion to the military budget on top of the $80 billion that they just added. So this has to stop. It's a moral crisis. It's a financial crisis. And I think we need to create an anti-war movement. The reason most people don't remember Cindy Shaheen is that when a Democrat was elected president, the anti-war movement, a lot of it was sort of linked to the party and disappeared because it wasn't Bush we were yelling at anymore. But those wars have raged on for 8 years, and some of them have expanded and some new ones have popped up. And now we have this giant military, this huge budget, and now we have a madman in the White House. And the anti-war movement needs to be revitalized big time. And so this is not a partisan event. It is an anti-war movement on the Pentagon. And so if anybody can take part, that would be awesome. It is an overnight trip. It's 2 days. There's an event on Facebook. We'll push it out on our page more. We need to organize people. If a lot of people want to be involved and can't go down to the Pentagon, maybe we'll try to also organize a sister event here on Long Island. It's very important that they see the Women's March made all the stories because it was huge and it was everywhere. We need to be having an anti-war discussion and anti-war protest that mirror those things, because until we stop the war machine, we're not going to be fixing all these problems. Our country is bankrupt because we spend like we're in the middle of a world war for the last 75 years straight. Meanwhile, we're fighting people who live in caves in Afghanistan who are only fighting us because we're there in the first place. It's just outrageous and it needs to stop. So this is something I've been trying to get going for a little while. And I think it would be great if we can connect it up with a larger nationwide movement. Yeah.
We're going to go, and we have room for 3 more in our minivan.
Awesome. So we need the caravan down there, exactly. So so keep that on your calendar, and again, we'll be pushing that out. Yes, no, we do. No, but and we should be. I'm hoping we can plan something to rival his war parade. We will rival it with a peace parade, hopefully, as well. So I think it's important. There's this thing going on in this country where you're not allowed to talk about anything involving our military without being accused of being unpatriotic. Are there children in the room? Yes. Okay, I'm not going to say what I'm going to say then. That's a bunch of crap. We need to retake patriotism. Their missiles are not patriotism. They can wear their little lapel pin. That's not patriotism. Sending troops to die overseas is not patriotism. We need to take it back. To quote Pete Seeger, if you love Uncle Sam, bring him home. The troops need to come home. That's how you're a patriot. So this is what we need to start doing. That's another major event that's coming on down the line. I'm also seeing DSA is organizing a women's strike on the 8th of March. Maybe some of the DSA people in the back want to speak to that a little bit more. I don't know. I don't have the details in front of me. I don't know if you guys do.
It's all very work in progress at this
Okay.
point, but we're trying to develop a network we want to work upon what we want to do. We're thinking about coordinating with some sort of protest action at workplaces, encouraging them to leave work about an hour early, and also encouraging men in the workplace to take over for them. This also includes domestic and household labor as well.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And with that said, we only have a few minutes left. Oh, you have an announcement?
Well, there's also something tomorrow night about the national jail system and all the people who are apparently about 75% of the people currently being held in national prison system are innocent, or at least not found guilty. I honestly don't know the details.
I don't have it in front of me either. Maybe we'll push it out on Facebook.
So please look for that on our Facebook page. Tomorrow afternoon or evening.
Okay.
Never gonna finish it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what did she say?
250 Fulton Avenue, Hempstead, tomorrow at 5:30.
250 Fulton Avenue, Hempstead. Tomorrow when? 5:30.
But I'll be there.
Okay. So as time is running down, we did promise an open mic situation. I'm sure they're not going to kick us out at 4 on the dot. If people want to come up to the front and just speak for a few minutes, please do. Let's open up the floor. So you don't need to raise hands. Just come. Yeah.
Well, you know, I was on.
Yes.
Agenda. Okay. You know, we have a Long Island Immigrant Rights Committee and meeting. We have a once-a-month meeting. We're meeting February. I got it here. At Panera in Huntington, and let's see, it is February. No, excuse me. It is March 5th. At 7 o'clock, Panera in Huntington. And a number of the members in Huntington, the Rights Committee have joined Huntington Rapid Response Team, which is part of Jobs with Justice. If anybody has seen Newsday today, they had a big article. Do I have it? Okay. This is what was put in Newsday today, and the sanctuary movement has gotten started in Huntington. We have a church in Setauket who is a sanctuary. We have a synagogue, 2 synagogues getting ready to sign up, 2 Unitarian Universalists getting ready to sign up for sanctuary. The rapid response team that we have happening. We have one in Huntington, there's one in, I think, Babylon, and I have a few others happening. If you're interested in joining a rapid response team, you go on to Jobs with Justice, get the information there. On February 24th, we are having a Migra Cop Watch training at the Unitarian Universalist in Stony Brook. On the 24th. No, that's not it. And that's going to be happening too. I'm going to put that out also.
Yeah, we'll share it all over Facebook.
Yeah. So that's basically what's happening. And a couple of us Long Islanders, I can't believe I got a paper, but we were in the city yesterday. Look at that. I'm in the front.
I said, is that you?
There have been political detainees, right? Detainees and deportations based on politics. Now, this is akin to fascism. And what's going on in this country is just horrible. Breaking up families, going after our immigrants that are in our communities, hardworking people on TPS, by the way, our rapid response team are also working with Jobs with Justice. We do accompaniment to immigration court, and I've said 2 accompaniments. We got these guys out on very high bonds. These families have to put up everything to get these kids out. So we have some horrible stuff going on here. We need everybody to get out. Also, our sheriff here on Long Island, Toulon, who was he and voted in as a Democrat? Was he also on the conservative line?
I think he was.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I hate to say it, this is a piece of crap. And we need to get out. And, I'm sorry. We need to get out, and we're going to work on a protest because they're going to start, and they are continuing to enforce, when people get arrested, reporting them to ICE.
Yeah, they're cooperating with ICE.
Cooperating with ICE. And you know what? This is not who we are. This is not who we are. It's not like we're going after criminals. We are going after hard-working people who are tax-paying, who are supporting our communities, who we can't go along without. And just like our families came here as immigrants, these people have given up everything to come here. And because they came here and fought for everything to get here, they are the strongest of the strong. And these are the people